Good evening, everyone. I'm opening the Monday, May 4th, 2020 City Council regular meeting and calling it to order. Welcome, everyone. So this again is a remote City Council meeting. I believe this is our fourth that we have had. Before we move on to tonight's agenda items, I'd like to talk about the remote meeting format. So on March 6th, I issued an emergency proclamation declaring a civil emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 outbreak. And on March 24th, the governor issued Proclamation 20-28 prohibiting meetings that follow under the Open Public Meetings Act, such as our City Council meeting, from being conducted in person. Tonight's meeting will be held entirely remotely. The meeting will be recorded, streamed live, and available for later listening on the city's YouTube channel. Myself, the council, and certain city staff are using our cameras. However, be aware that our meeting platform cannot show all our videos at one time. Rather, it will focus on the last 4 to 5 individuals who spoke. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so that everyone can follow along. Those who provided advance notice are able to make comments under the audience comment portion of the meeting. And we did also receive email comments for this meeting as well from the public. At this point, we'll take a moment to take the roll call of the council members in attendance, and please say here when I call your name. Councilmember DeMichelle? Here. Councilmember Goodman? Here. Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Council President Hunt? Here. Councilmember Martz?
Here.
Deputy Council President Ray?
Here.
And Councilmember Walsh?
Here.
7 all here and accounted for. In addition, we have the following city staff participating. Our city administrator, Wally Bobkowitz, our deputy city administrator, Andrew Snyder, our city attorney, Jim Haney, our city clerk, Tina Eggers, our deputy city clerk, Tisha Geiser, Economic Development Manager, Jen Davis-Hayes, and are there any additional staff that I failed to identify?
Megan Curtis Murphy is also on the line.
Oh, Megan, thank you. For those members of the public on the call, welcome. The clerk or I will call on you to make comments when we reach that portion of the agenda. So before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. And for council members, please continue to use the Skype meeting messenger to indicate when you wish to speak and identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion or second a motion, or participate in debate. So the first item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and if I could get everyone to mute their microphones, I will start it, and you can say it at home along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next portion of our meeting is audience comments, and citizen comments are an important part of our council's public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions we make. When you are making comments, please make sure to direct them to the whole council. And the directions for tonight's meeting, when you are recognized, please unmute your microphone. And if you're on a cell phone, it might be *6, *6. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. And then please remute your microphone when you're done. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will still need to proceed. You're encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you're able to. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. If a speaker is out of order, I will ask them to stop and mute their microphone. If a speaker does not comply, I may direct staff to mute their microphone. If a disruption to the meeting occurs and order cannot be restored, I may direct staff to remove you from the call. Again, citizen comments, written and verbal, they're an important part of our council and our city's public process. The city takes these comments seriously, and we thank you for taking your time tonight to come and address our city council. City Clerk.
Yes, Larry Franks has signed up to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Franks, would you like to address the council?
Yes, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I miss my fish. Yes, mine. I'm very possessive of the salmon that returned to the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery, unfortunately in continually declining numbers. I miss the camaraderie with my many friends who are also fascinated by these miraculous animals, but necessitated by mitigating the risk of COVID-19 infection. Issaquah Salmon Hatchery is appropriately closed to the public, and ongoing work is pretty much limited to one individual at a time doing what they need to do to nurture these fish. And I'm really going to miss the joy of sharing my love of these fish with the many visitors we've enjoyed in the past. I led over 1,000 individuals on tours of the hatchery last year, most of them 3rd and 4th graders, inspiring leaders to be, but they could also easily be non-symptomatic carriers. I'm a biologist. Okay, a fisheries biologist, not a human virus specialist, but the writing is on the wall. If we as a planet do not have a highly effective vaccine and tried and true treatment in place for this illness, it would be personally dangerous to me and my family to lead tours this fall, as well as risky for the tour participants themselves. I know there's many treatments in development, but as a biologist, I know the new normal of social distancing needs to be maintained for many months. There's enormous pressure to reopen businesses, reemploy folks, even plan for the Salmon Days Festival. But I choose to err on the side of caution. Employment and festivals with a cost in lives are not worth it. Thank you for listening and acting accordingly.
Thank you very much.
My address.
Oh, well, go ahead and put it in the record right now. That'd be great.
Okay, I'm a 48-year resident at 24001 Southeast 103rd Street. I love it here in Issaquah.
Thank you, Larry. Has anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
No one further has signed up to speak.
Thank you very much. As a reminder for any of those watching tonight or later on as it's taped, you can always write comments and submit them at any time to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. In addition, comments received by email on tonight's agenda topics will be acknowledged by the council president under the relevant agenda item. So the next item of business for us this evening is committee and regional reports, and we'll go around the so-called council chamber one by one. Let's start with Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Zach Hall. Just one quick report, just to say that the next meeting of the Regional Affordable Housing Committee has been scheduled for next Friday, May 15th, from 1 to 4 p.m. We're going to be using a video conferencing system. We're not really sure which one yet, but I've spoken quite a few times before about the scope of our work, so I won't repeat that. But if any member of council or the community has any questions about what the Regional Affordable Housing Committee is doing, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember DiMichele.
Yes, I have no report this evening. The Healthier Here Board will be meeting this coming Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It will be a virtual meeting. And as Councilmember Hall said, if anyone is interested, please let me know. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Walsh. The Economic District Development Board, EDDB, meeting for May was canceled, and so I have no report.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. Eastside Fire and Rescue's Finance and Administration Committee meeting will meet on Wednesday, May 6th. So it will be a virtual meeting. On the agenda is the proposal to reform Eastside Fire and Rescue into a nonprofit corporation. And if a recommendation is made to the full board, then each of the partners of the entity also needs to be involved in approving that by approving a revised interlocal agreement, articles of incorporation, and bylaws. So I will give a report out at our next meeting of that. And then the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board will meet on May 14th. That will be a virtual meeting as well. I have not seen the agenda, but I do expect that discussion will happen at the board about the letter that Mayor Polly sent requesting a reduction in the amount that Issaquah pays. That's all I know about that agenda right now. And I believe the city also has received a response from the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board Chair, North Bend Councilmember Alan Gotthelf, and I would request, I don't think that I've seen that response go out to the full council, so if that response could go out, I would appreciate it. So in short, I believe that letter requests financial information from the city, so the board can have the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board can have a fuller discussion. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. We'll make sure that you get the response, the entire council gets the response letter, and also the additional information that the city will be providing to the board.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board meeting for Thursday, May 7th has unfortunately been canceled. However, the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee, after several months of non-meeting, will be meeting virtually at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, May 13th at Redmond City Hall. And we do have one potential future action item related to the proposed 2021 King County utility rates. I don't have the details yet, but that's one of those ones where we will have an initial read, and then I will come back and talk to council about it, and then we'll come back, Sound Cities will come back and discuss it. There's other discussion items. We'll be discussing the legislative session and COVID and Regional Homeless Authority and COVID-19 impacts and response, where we sort of compare notes on as municipalities. But I'm very glad that PIC will be coming back to meeting, although you haven't lived until you've done a roll call with 38 cities. It makes the 8 of us seem positively swift. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. The April 22nd meeting of the King County Growth Management Planning Council was canceled, and the next meeting of the Growth Management Planning Council is scheduled right now for June 24th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the Kokanee ILA Interlocal Agreements Management Committee meeting on April 27th. And Kokanee, Lake Sammamish kokanee, are a type of salmon that are very endangered. They're on the verge of extinction. And the purpose of this interlocal agreement is to coordinate efforts of multiple jurisdictions in the Lake Sammamish watershed to help support recovery of this population and bring it back from the brink of extinction. At the April 27th meeting, we appointed a chair, which will be me, and we also worked on reviewing the 2021 draft budget and draft work plan for the year to understand what work will be accomplished under and is planned to be accomplished under the ILA. Our next meeting will be in July or August, and in this meeting, the main agenda items will be the 2021 final budget and work plan adoption. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda this evening is the mayor's report, and I have a few updates for tonight. So the first update I'll deliver will be on rental assistance program, and then I'll give a longer update on the city's boards and commissions who have not been meeting since the state emergency order went into effect. So on March 23rd, 2020, the City Council authorized $100,000 towards rental assistance for residents impacted by COVID-19. Up to $500 a month for up to 3 months is available to residents needing help paying their rent. The statistics published last week in Agenda Bill 791 on Friday, which is on tonight's consent agenda, were accurate at the time the agenda was published. However, we've updated them. So I'm going to provide you with some new numbers because things have changed just since Friday. As of May 1st, 2020, over 3/4 of the allocated funds have been distributed. That's $78,000. The equivalent of 158 households were able to benefit from the program. Of those, 129 received assistance once, and 29 received assistance for more than 1 month. And this represents a total of 486 residents, broken out as 408 residents receiving a single payment and 78 residents receiving a rental payment of more than 1 month of assistance. So this is the second month of the program since council adoption, and some households have requested assistance for the second time. 94% of the households who received rental assistance experienced layoffs, lost jobs, or reduced work hours. The remaining 7%, including those who had health-related problems or a lack of childcare preventing them from working. So we would like to extend our appreciation to our two partners, the Issaquah Community Services and St. Vincent de Paul St. Joseph Issaquah Conference. These two volunteer-based organizations have helped distribute the funds and ensure that the residents get the help they need. Next thing I'd like to talk about, and I have 3 different items under boards and commissions. So the first is that, as reflected in Agenda Bill AB 7937 that you'll see on the consent calendar tonight, due to the inability to conduct interviews of applicants and in order to limit further delays as the city's boards and commissions do begin to convene again, I'm extending the terms of the sitting board and commission members that would have otherwise expired on April 30th, 2020 for a 1-year period. That's not every person on every board and commission because we rotate the terms so that we don't have that, but some would have been expiring on would have expired on April 30th. As stay-at-home restrictions lift, there will be an extended phase approach to the boards and commissions returning to their work based on the nature and timing of the work plan items. The next thing under boards and commissions is the sunsetting of the Rivers and Streams and creation of a new environmental board. The Rivers and Streams Board is sunsetting. The unfortunate fact is that the Rivers and Streams Board was functionally given a very narrow purview as of late, and and that meant that they rarely met in the last several years. That needs to change. The boards and commissions serve an important role in local government and serve as a community voice on issues of importance to the community. I strongly feel and have discussed many times with the administration and council members that we absolutely need a board and commission that regularly advises us on environmental and climate change issues broadly. Environmental stewardship is an important pillar of our city's strategic plan, and we need a commission to help us achieve our goals in this area. So that the Rivers and Streams Board is being sunsetted is not a reflection on the importance of the work or a reflection on the competence and dedication of board members. The board members graciously dedicated their time and expertise to this board for many years, and I thank them for this. The administration is committed to forming a new board commission that will focus on the environment this year. Focus on the environment in this year, 2020. This board or commission will meet regularly, at least once per month, based on the council work plan items that are referred. The staff liaison for this group will be our sustainability coordinator, Megan Curtis Murphy. Community members that are interested in environmental stewardship, environmental policy, and planning and climate action should reach out to Megan to be part of the discussions around the formation of this new board or commission. Council will be tasked with the approval of the formation of the new commission and any code updates required to create it. During the transition, we will assume, unless otherwise advised, that current members and applicants who had applied for the Rivers and Streams Board in early 2020 would likely be interested in applying for the newly constituted board or commission. As well, an advertisement to the community at large will be completed to ensure all regular and alternate seats are occupied. I look forward to tracking progress on the formation of this new board or commission over the course of 2020. And the last update on boards and commissions is on the development of a new recovery task force for Issaquah. I'm convening a mayor's recovery task force which will advise the city on various issues related to responding to the pandemic and future reopening of city services and programs. The task force will also advise the city on other community initiatives that are important to Issaquah residents and businesses over the next several months. Membership of this new task force will primarily consist of current members of the cities and boards commissions, and the following individuals have been invited to participate on the task force. Jason, and apologies for any mispronounced names. Jason Voice of Planning Policy, Marisol Visser of Transportation, Mike Brennan from the Development Commission, Nina Milligan, former City Council member and also on the Transportation Advisory Board, Pavel Aprakian from Economic Vitality, Randy Harrison from Planning Policy, Sakat Sen from Economic Vitality, Trish Bloor from Arts, Janine Sanders, I selected her as a community member at large, Grace Chen, I selected her from the community to represent youth and young adults, and Shashi Kulkarni, who is a retired community health professional. We have 3 alternate seats as well, Marlene Waxa from Parks, Ron Fall from Planning Policy, and Stephanie Solomon from Transportation. Ongoing regular meetings will be held from 4 to 5:30, the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, May through August, and the task force may be extended depending on the progress of the pandemic response. And that concludes the Mayor's report for this evening. The next item on our agenda this evening is a couple of informational updates, and we will start with ID 0687, food delivery fees. This is an informational item for tonight. No council action has been requested for this evening, and I'd like to start by asking Jen Davis-Hayes, Economic Development Manager, to make a presentation. Come on up, Jen.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. I'm here to update on a request we received to explore putting a cap on the restaurant delivery app commissions. On April 24th, the City of Seattle instituted an emergency order to for a 15% cap on food delivery service commissions until restaurants are able to offer dine-in services. After that time, our city was contacted by several restaurants inquiring if we plan to do the same. Since then, city staff have reached out to 26 restaurants, and we were able to speak to 13 of them. We sent emails to the other 13 we did not get on the phone. And our partners also reached out to businesses, including the Downtown Issaquah Association, Regency Centers at Grand Ridge Plaza, and the Chamber. We also reached out to other Eastside cities to inquire if they have heard from their restaurants and if they plan to do the same. And we also spoke to our economic development colleagues in King County about if they were planning to do caps as well. The cities and King County mentioned that they were not working on at the time. And if King County would proceed and do something like this, it would only be applied to unincorporated areas of King County. So overall, we learned that some restaurants didn't use these services before, but now can account up to 1/3 to 1/2 of their sales. Other businesses have avoided signing up for these services because of the cost and have encouraged their customers to order on and pick up curbside deliveries. The general feeling was that the fees were too high, and there was overall consensus that expressed there was interest in the city's pursuit to have these fees reduced. Many felt they didn't have another option. One of the things we learned was, because we asked, well, there are several apps that charge different prices, some as low as 13 to 15% and some as high as 30%. And we asked, well, why don't you just use the lower app fee? And what the restaurants have informed us is that as they added these services, they have increased sales. So users use the app to order. They look up they want to order Mexican food or Thai food. They use that app rather than going to the website of that restaurant and then choosing which service to get delivery from. What we also learned about what's happening in the market. So last Monday, so that was several days after Seattle passed their cap, some delivery services were adding other fees. So not considered restaurant delivery commissions, but other fees to make up for what they felt they needed. And DoorDash voluntarily reduced their commission fees by 50% until the COVID closures are done. So they are currently charging between 13 and 15% for these charges for delivery fees. I will await for any questions.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify one thing too. We've also had at least one council member who's received a call directly from a business as well. Like I know they have called into the chamber and they've called into you, but Council Member Martz has also gotten calls directly. Okay. Questions? Maybe I can provide a little context too here. This is here this evening because it was brought up as an item that the council may wish to discuss. And in a week, we have collected as much information as we've just presented to you. And so we can start here with Council Member Martz, if you like.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council Member Martz. So, yeah, the understanding, thank you for the staff presenting that. There's a number of questions here that I don't know if we're going to answer this evening, but they happen at the intersection of public health and our role in supporting our residents and our businesses. I don't know what the right answer is, but it was mentioned this evening that one option is that people can go pick up. And in fact, since I found out how the services work, I've been doing that when DoorDash isn't an option. But I don't know if that's the right solution either. I don't know. I mean, clearly, I don't know. There's a question for council whether we want to take action in this area. I think there's potentially a public health reason to do so in trying to encourage people to, if we can figure out a way to assure that the services are not usurious to our businesses, but would discourage people from having to go out and do this. If there's an urgency, so I guess the question is really for fellow council members. I guess I would have questions. The questions I have for staff is to understand how it's working for Seattle. I think that they're now a week or a week and a half into it. Chicago, I know, has something like this. Evanston, Illinois, we have some staff that are familiar with Evanston. So my question would be how it's working in those locations, and understanding that whether we as a council would want to take action, both or maybe for differing reasons, potentially around our businesses, but also potentially around trying to encourage our residents to follow King County public health guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Martz. I skipped something here. I was supposed to go to Council President Hunt, and I apologize, for a summary of any email comments that the council might have received on this topic. Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did receive to the City Council, we did receive some correspondence on this informational item. So I will do my best to summarize that correspondence now. We received the email from Kathy McCory, the CEO of the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce. And Kathy wrote that the Chamber Board of Directors had not had a chance to discuss this, however, would like to make sure that all considerations are given to local restaurants. She wrote with concern about unintended consequences, and she also wrote that the Chamber has created a list of restaurants offering takeout and have it on their website, and this contains links to each restaurant's website. Anything they can do to support Drive Up and any other preferred options for restaurants they will pursue. We also received the email from community member Steve Pereira. He wrote that his initial reaction was he disliked the proposal and, to summarize, did not have enough information about impacts to different entities. And then we also received feedback on this informational item from Connie Marsh. And Connie Marsh wrote, to summarize her comments, she wrote to try applying the following questions to the food delivery dilemma. What is the problem? What is the solution? And how did we get here? And that's the summary of the correspondence we received.
Thank you. And I think next up for questions I had Councilmember Ray.
Thank you. This is Chris Ray. Jen, for you mentioned just as you were presenting that there have been some additional fees. Was that in Seattle in response to their 15%, or are we seeing increase in fees across the board from service providers?
What I understood is that was from us in Seattle right after the fees. And they weren't, again, calling them the typical commissions, but I haven't done much research beyond that.
Do we know if since the COVID-19 crisis started, if rates have increased, or are these the same rates that were in place 6 months ago? Do we know that?
I'm not sure about that.
I'd like to know that. If as we dig into this, that would be really fascinating to know. And then, do you have any data on what the impact, since most of the delivery people are independent contractors here, what the impact on them will be if we were to impose a cap on this? Any data or anecdotal information?
No. The Seattle emergency order also required that all tips go to the drivers, which again was surprising that they already didn't do that. So yeah, I think again each of the services are very different. And for instance, Uber Eats very much are Uber drivers that can do either platform, so they may bounce back and forth between the apps. But you're right, this does impact some of our gig workers that live and work in our community.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate all the work you did.
And I am not seeing additional questions, but Jen, I've heard a few requests at least for additional information. We will have an opportunity for discussion too. How is it working in Seattle and other cities? Have rates increased since COVID-19 came in, delivery rates, and what potential impacts might there be downstream on delivery service folks? Are there any other questions before I open it up for general conversation, general discussion? I am not seeing any. Oh, there we go. Council President. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Jen, I wondered if you could give us an overview of if there are other things that the restaurants in our city are saying would be important for us to consider. I think that as was mentioned in the letter from Kathy McCory of the Chamber of Commerce, we're looking to support the restaurants and make sure that we are doing what we can. And so I wondered if you have insights from them.
Yeah, so I think, we are offering support to businesses of all kinds. As far as restaurants, they want to be open and be able back to full blast. I think as far as increasing their sales, we have done some things with a restaurant map about what's open. So we have promoted those restaurants and businesses that are open to encourage the takeout orders. And as businesses begin to reopen on a smaller scale, we'll be supporting them to look at how they can reopen in an effective way. But nothing else directly that was requested from the restaurant that we spoke to.
Additional questions or comments? Any other questions of Jen? So next steps. This is
sorry, it does look like Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Hall did
you know what?
Question.
Sorry, I am missing some. Here we go. Thank you. I have Councilmember DeMichelle, Councilmember Walsh, and Councilmember Hall. Let's start with Councilmember DeMichelle.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. When I saw that this was on the agenda, I decided to do some reading about it and find out a little bit more. And as Councilmember Marks said, they have done this. They put a cap in Chicago and New York City and San Francisco and then Seattle. And so when I was reading that, first of all, it seemed to be a theme that the issue of delivery fees that are imposed on restaurants was a problem even before COVID-19, that it's maybe been exacerbated by the current situation, but that there was some form of gouging or restaurants felt that the fees were too high long before this started. So I think that in order to make a decision as a council member, I would like to have a little bit more information just about how the food delivery model works. And I also read, for example, that none of the food delivery apps that we have are making a profit at this point. And so I'd like to just know why do we have so many? Are they all splitting up the business because there are so many apps? How is the model working? And then it seems as though it's mostly been done in large cities. As a medium-sized city, would Issaquah be vulnerable to having these food delivery apps just pull out of our area if we decided to impose that fee? And what are the risks of that? And then finally, with Councilmember Ray, I would be really concerned because I noticed that I've been ordering out quite a bit since we've been sheltering in place, that there are many people delivering to me, and I would think that they are, perhaps this is a job that's taking a place of a job that they've lost in the restaurant business. And so I would be worried about the unintended consequences if one of those apps or all of them decided to withdraw from delivering in Issaquah if we impose the fees. But I also want to support our restaurants. I think it's apparently, from what I've read, it has been an ongoing problem that that these food delivery apps are taking a pretty big chunk out of restaurant profits. So I think we need to just know a little bit more about the bigger context before I can make a decision on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Ray, there is a sad little face there. Did I miss you, or in the comment box? I did.
No, that was an earlier sad face.
Okay, earlier sad face. Great. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Walsh. I, too, am concerned about the unintended consequences for the restaurants and consumer access and the gig workers and the delivery apps. We just don't know enough about this as a small city. I feel like to make effective decisions without having unintended consequences that could be worse. And I feel like the best method for moving forward here is to inform the public about the fees and the impacts to the small businesses. We have a lot of attention from the public who really want to support their local businesses. And if they have the information available to know that the choices they're making are actually hurting those local businesses, they might make different decisions that meet with their goals. So I would really encourage us as a city to use our platform while people are paying attention in order to help with that information, because ultimately that is our goal in this. And I feel like that is probably a better way to solve that problem than to go forward with capping fees at this point.
Thank you. We have a question from Council President Hunt.
I already asked my question.
Oh, wow. Way out of order here. Thank you. Councilmember Hall, quick question.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Hall here. My questions have been answered, so I won't draw this out. Just to add that I'm much more interested in the results of this cap in Evanston than a city like Seattle or Chicago that's bigger, that they might be able to have a cap and not worry about these kinds of food delivery service providers leaving. A concern that smaller and medium-sized cities would have. So just kind of narrowing the scope of that question a bit. Thank you.
So there's Councilmember Goodman is typing. I'm not sure if you want to chime in or not, but while I'm waiting and watching, let's see. I have Councilmember Martz next, followed by Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it seems to me there are two separate questions. One is about a long-term, whether it's a good business model or bad business model to charge the restaurants versus charging the individuals who are purchasing goods. But to me, there's the urgency, and the reason why this is a potential emergency really gets at what is the best way to safely support our local restaurants. And if it's really important to me that there is one of the services that's currently operating at 13%, because that tells me they can afford to operate at 13%, which means the ones that are doing it at 30%, like if nobody was operating at 13%, then maybe people would go away if you capped it at 15%. But I just don't have that concern, because the problem is that there's these different services that are charging different amounts, and the public doesn't understand it. And so what I don't want to do is, like we're going to eat out, we're going to order food 4 times a week because we've made a commitment to doing that. But the question is, what's the safest way to go about doing that, right? Is it for me to go down and pick up food because I don't know whether the services are gouging the local restaurants? I mean, it's incredible to me that if I order a $10 item, that $3 out of that $10 should go to the service, and then I'm charged a fee, and then I'm asked to give an amount to the driver. During this emergency, when the reason that I'm doing this is to avoid public contact and to meet King County social distancing regulations, it seems wrong to have these varying levels of cost and a penalty imposed on our local restaurants. So I would very much like to know how Evanston proceeds and how it goes with Seattle. But I think we should think about doing something. And it's coming from restaurants. It's not little old me, right? It was us being contacted by a number of restaurants feeling that this wasn't fair. So I hope we consider doing it, but really specifically around the public health aspect. We're going to be in this situation for at least 3 more weeks. The latest IHME numbers that came out today are very concerning. They say that it could be more than 3 weeks based on how those are moving forward. They're now recommending into June before we move into phase 2. So I hope that we consider taking emergency action on this based on what we find out on how other cities are doing it, and perhaps understanding the business model a little bit better for the express purpose of trying to keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are a couple more people that comment, but I want to just chime in here for a minute for any of the public that's watching. You can follow the King County health and safety protocols and pick up your food at takeout as well. So it's not that there is a preferred method, one over the other. There are protocols in place for anybody who is only offering pick it up at the door as well. So I don't want anybody to get concerned that they couldn't do that. We have Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Ray, and then I'm going to kind of get you guys circle the horses and talk about this. And I have a few comments before you start. So let's go to Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. I don't think I have any other questions to add, except that I agree with the council members who have made comments about needing more information before a decision is made. And I'm not even at the point where I would say I would support or oppose. I think we need more information before we even decide whether there's some proposal on the table that we want to consider. And maybe I misheard or didn't hear everything, but one of the questions I have is what choices restaurants might be making that could help with the fees. I'm just not clear on all the delivery platforms and what the choices are and how restaurants sign up, and if there are any choices that they can make to not be subject to that. I just don't know enough about it. It's probably mostly because we pick up rather than order and have delivery. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Ray, Deputy Council President Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. I'm going to go in a similar vein that Councilmember Goodman went, and that's before we make a decision, I'd really like to understand what the restaurants are getting for the fees that they are charged. Is it just delivery services, or are there other value adds that are associated with it? And also, what are the options in terms of whether or not the restaurant bears the delivery charge or the recipient bears the delivery charge? Because I'm of the mind that there are both options. And so before we move forward with limiting it, I want to really understand what's all involved in making a decision if I'm a restaurateur to use this kind of service, and what I'm buying for that 30%, whatever it is that I pay.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Ray. So before we get into sort of getting some direction from council, I wanted to give Administrator Bobkowitz an opportunity to talk as well. My concern is that we have one person who is doing economic development during COVID crisis, which is meaning, attending all kinds of meetings about what the new business process are and all. this sounds like a research project. I'm not sure that we have the bandwidth to do it. So I'm just going to let the city administrator pitch in. We may be able to monitor other cities, but as far as unwinding this and telling you exactly how this works in the community, in the restaurant community, I just don't know that City of Issaquah has the resources to be the one to dig in and define that model for you. But I'd let the City Administrator Bob Kowitz weigh in.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We certainly come to the table with no prior expertise in this matter. I think if the council wishes to discuss this further as part of a council meeting, the beauty of this format is that we could likely phone a friend and have someone join us at the council meeting to make a presentation who knows more about this. And I think finding an individual to do that it probably wouldn't take a lot of staff time. So I think really the question for the council is, do you wish to pursue this to get more information? If not, would you prefer us to come up with a communication strategy? I think as a number of you have mentioned, many people are unaware of the economics of the delivery. And so we could certainly, as soon as this week, put information out to the Issaquah community to let people be aware of these practices and encourage them to be knowledgeable users of these restaurants here in Issaquah. So I think really it depends on where you're going. But yes, to spend a lot more staff time, and certainly the city attorney, I think at some point would like to weigh in on this as well. He has reviewed the ordinance or the declaration in Seattle and has some questions and concerns about that. He's done some initial scans of other communities. I know the city of Chicago has already had lawsuits threatened against them by the delivery companies. So I think you'd also want to hear the city attorney, and as the council knows, the city attorney in his office has a full plate as well. So I think we can either have it as a discussion at a future meeting, and we could bring an expert in to make a presentation. We could do communications, or if you would prefer, direct staff to do additional work, and then other things likely get put aside.
Thank you for that. So if the options in there, we're bringing an expert, direct staff to do additional research, and I missed the last one. And there was some promotional items, promoting a best practice in the community. It would be great if the council members indicated who would like to talk about those three suggestions. I see Councilmember DiMichele is teed up.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. In regard to that phone a friend, I'm wondering if the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Issaquah Association, and so forth could encourage. I just like to hear from restaurants, and then if DoorDash and Uber Eats have some local representatives, I'd be willing to listen to their point of view as well. So I'm just wondering if our partners in the business community could put out a call for them to send us emails, give us input. I think that would be really helpful and would not take staff time. So just a thought to consider.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we should consider taking action. I'm not here tonight to say we definitely should take a particular action, but it really strikes me that 4 of our, let's say, 26 restaurants contacted us, right? If we had that kind of engagement from private citizens in the city on an issue, we would take up that issue. We wouldn't necessarily go with them because that's what they want, but we would take it up, and we would not say that we don't have the resources to consider it. It's clearly something that a non-trivial number of our restaurants are grappling with, and I think we should consider it. Thank you.
Any other comments on the path forward? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. I thought Councilmember DiMichele had a really good idea, and about asking our partners and some of the delivery folks if they could help us at least understand better. I mean, we're limited with staff. I understand that it's a potential issue, but I think we are in a position right now where we don't understand enough in order for us to probably even consider taking action. So anything we can do to leverage our partners and friends out in the business community to help us understand so that we're not taking staff time to do it, I think is a great idea. But I'm concerned about Jen Davis-Hayes just taking this on as a project that could take quite a bit of time to research. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Deputy Council President Ray.
So I think it's I would like to see a two-pronged approach. One is to promote the use of our restaurants and to promote people to do, pickup as opposed to online services with delivery. That way it kind of takes the delivery out of the equation. And then I would like to just have some more information as we maybe monitor this situation going forward and see how it evolves. But I agree with Councilmember Goodman. I don't think we have enough information right now to make a good decision. And I would like to see what possibly what I think it was Councilmember Hall said, what Evanston is doing, which is a city about the same size as we are, what their results have been. And then finally, as City Administrator Bobkowitz mentioned, I'd like to hear from our attorney too on what are the legal implications of this. And then finally, if we were to move forward, how would we do enforcement is another thing that I'm kind of grappling with. And I don't know that we have the resources to do that. So I think there's just a lot of questions out there before we can go forward in a comprehensive manner.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more council member questions or comments, so I'll go back to City Administrator Bobkowitz, ask if you have enough direction and also whether or not it was your expectation that our legal counsel would provide some information tonight as well.
I don't believe Mr. Haney has much more to add other than I think he was keen to hear the discussion tonight so we could better be prepared for next steps. Madam Mayor, members of the council, what I think I hear you saying is that you'd like us on a future agenda with more information, specifically as much information as possible from local Issaquah restaurants. We can also do our best to get some additional information from other communities that have done this to try to get some feedback. So your next regular meeting is on the 18th of May. We already know that's going to be a pretty full agenda. But if you'd like to come back on the 18th, I think it'd be difficult for us to do it any sooner. So unless you'd like to have a special meeting, so I would propose we come back on the 18th.
Am I generally seeing head nods from the four that I can see? Okay, Council President is typing, so let me give her a second. Go ahead, Council President Hunt.
I think this is Council President Hunt. I think this was a good conversation. I generally agreed with the summary that that was just given. I do, however, want to also learn more about what the chamber CEO is wondering about, which are the unintended consequences, because I think if we have the Chamber of Commerce of our city writing us to City Council with wondering about the unintended consequences of something we're doing, we should take that very seriously. So I would like to really understand that, and it's not, this is not a part of the economy that I'm familiar with how it works, and so I think there's just a lot of unknowns there, so I would need a lot more information.
Great. Anyone else wishing to add on before we wrap this item up? Okay, thank you. Thank you for all that feedback. The next informational item this evening is ID 0689, updated 2020-2021 work plan, and I'd like to get City Administrator Bobkowitz to make a presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We're here this evening to talk about the City Council's 2020-2021 work plan. Before I get started, I want to give a little background and context to the work plan and hopefully provide the the larger community a better understanding of why there is a work plan and what it is. As you all know, the City of Issaquah completed a strategic plan last year, and at the conclusion of the strategic plan, the City Council met on June 7th, 2019, to go through the various aspects of the strategic plan and select priorities to begin the compilation of a work plan for the current fiscal year. Those prioritizations were used as we put together the budget for fiscal 2020. But at the conclusion of the budget process and as we began the fiscal year in January, we really didn't have a work plan document that would help guide our work to not only implement the strategic plan, but also to identify those important issues that came up during the course of the budget process, in addition to some additional issues that I identified based on my discussions with the council as I onboarded as your city administrator. So on February 1st, 2020, the City Council had a special meeting on a Saturday to go through a proposed work plan that included the items that were identified during the City Council's June 7, 2019 discussion, identify items that were listed during the budget process, and then additional items that I identified. That was included in a document that the council reviewed on February 1st, and at that time the council provided general direction that the document reflected the compilation of those issues. Since February 1st, as you all know, we've gone through a dramatic change through the COVID-19 virus, not only from a public health perspective, but also from a financial perspective. As we've talked over the last few weeks here at the City Council, we're anticipating a 20% revenue decrease in the current fiscal year. At your last meeting, the mayor reported a number of changes that she had made in order to bring down expenses in a phase one plan of a multi-phase approach that the mayor proposed to deal with these budget issues. We'll be coming back to the council to discuss phase two on May 18th, and additional phases will be discussed as we move forward through the balance of the fiscal year. But with these cuts, naturally comes the question, what do we do now? What do we do moving forward? How do we take the priorities that the council has identified over the last several months, and how do we move forward with them? And so the purpose of the presentation this evening is to talk about those priorities and the administration's recommendations for next steps. Clearly, given the number of layoffs that were implemented beginning May 1, the furlough days, the existing vacant positions that were already part of the adopted 2020 budget, we're looking at a fairly significant decrease in staffing resources that are available to move forward. So we want to make sure in very specific terms that we discuss with the council what those expectations are, get your feedback, and then continue to report to you. As we go through the document, many of the projects and initiatives we have designated as on hold. And really what on hold means is we're not sure what the next steps are. I think as we have developed this revised work plan for your review, time has passed, we're getting a better idea of what, again, the various new normals that we're experiencing. And I think that hopefully we're by the end of May, we'll be at our next new normal where we'll have the second phase of budget reductions. Hopefully we'll have the phase two of Governor Inslee's recovery plan will be implemented at the beginning of June. And so we'll have a little bit more flexibility to move forward. So when things are said to be on hold, it's really unclear when we can move forward, but we're committed to you to come back to you on a regular basis in our next scheduled time to meet with the council and talk about the work plan. And after tonight would be on June 8th. That would be what we are proposing would be the first study session for the council since we have come back from the COVID-19 crisis and the changes to our work. So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, that's an overview of the presentation. What I'd like to do now is to ask Deputy City Clerk Geezer to bring up the document that's in your packet. And what I'd like to do is walk through that document page by page and then stop for questions at the end of each section. So, Madam Mayor, if that's all right, as the document comes up on the screen, I'm happy to answer any initial questions that there might be from you or members of the council.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, seeing none, may I move forward?
Go ahead.
All right, next page, please. So, as the council is aware, there are different categories in the strategic plan that the work plan addresses. The first area is the area of mobility. We have a chart at the beginning of each section to kind of summarize the changes in status. You'll see on the bottom of the page there is a key, a colored key that indicates each project. Projects are either on track, which means that the projects are moving forward at a pace that we anticipate based on prior discussions. We have minor challenges, which means that projects are delayed by a quarter. The small scope change or budget variance of 15 to 25%. The area in red, major challenges, projects that are delayed more than a quarter. Significant change to scope, budget variance over 25%. Then there are those projects on hold. The project's been temporarily paused, and timelines and narrative will be updated when progress resumes. And then there actually are one or two projects at the beginning of 2020 that we've been able to complete. So with this chart for mobility, you'll see that under the strategic plan actions, we felt that 3 were on track and 2 were facing minor challenges. The other critical services, those are the items that either came up through the budget process this past year or items that I identified. 6 were on track and 1 was at the major challenges stage. And now for the area of mobility, we have 2 that are facing major challenges and 3 that are on hold. And under critical services, 1 that are facing major challenges and 6 on hold. Next page.
City Administrator Bobkowitz, Councilmember DiMichele has a question on mobility.
Yes.
I can wait until we go through this next section, and then I would like to comment. Thank you. So,
Objective 1A is a plan for the transportation system is in place and funding is secured for major projects. The first section, MO1A and MO1B, deal with that. The first is the mobility master plan. Given that the mobility master plan is being worked on by the Transportation Advisory Committee, our boards and commissions have not been meeting at this point, and so we are saying that work is on hold until restrictions on public meetings have been lifted. In talking with Mayor Pauley, the administration is working toward a plan to once again have these meetings, even if they are done by video, and so we would look to reconvening the Transportation Advisory Board perhaps as soon as the first part of June to begin further discussions with that and then come back to the council at some appropriate point. If you recall, there was going to be a joint meeting with the Transportation Advisory Board in March. That was delayed because of the COVID-19 crisis. So while we see major challenges on that, work will continue on that project. Next is to develop and execute a long-term funding approach for larger capital projects. Again, this is a project that we're proposing to be on hold for a number of different reasons. Certainly because of the COVID-19 crisis, many issues remain up in the air that we're not been able to address because of these changes. And so we're suggesting at this point that project remain on hold. I would hope that after the 1st of June, we would be able to reevaluate next steps with that project. Objective 3, the preferred location and vision for a light rail integration is established. Certainly anything to do with light rail, the extension of light rail to Issaquah needs to be on hold at this point. Sound Transit has already announced its plans to place on hold all planning and construction of current projects, our project being several years down the road. So we think at this point it's prudent that would be on hold until we get a better understanding of where Sound Transit is moving forward with other light rail projects. Next page, please. Again, at the top of this page, MO3B, again, additional Sound Transit issues. MO3C, deals with partnership to facilitate the integration of city plans, land use, and zoning for future light rail. Again, we're stating this as major challenges. We would like to check in with the Sound Transit staff as soon as practical to get a better sense from them where the future planning fits in their plans. I think at this point it's still too early to know that, but I would think that would be the first conversation we would have with Sound Transit in the near term about the potential next steps. In the areas of other critical service items and timely opportunities, the King County Metro Issaquah Community Connections Partnership, Regional Employers Transit Group, Traffic Signal Management, Police Traffic Management, Traffic Sergeant, and short-term mobility initiatives all on hold, mostly, again, because until the world settles a little bit, I think it's going to be difficult to reestablish these discussions, specifically looking at each of them. The Issaquah Community Connections Partnership funding issues with King County Transit were already a challenge prior to COVID-19. We need, I think, those to settle to get a better sense of next steps there. Regional Employers Transit Group, again, while the majority of folks are working at home, I think we need to put a pause on that. Traffic Signal Management, as we look at the reorganization of our Public Works Department, and our plan is to come back to the Council on the 18th of May with recommendations there. Once that is established and we have made some staffing, filled some vacancies in staffing, we'll be able to move forward there. Police Traffic Management, again, traffic is down significantly while we look toward the importance of having a traffic sergeant. The planning for that is on hold at this point. Short-term mobility initiatives, again, until things settle further, we think it's prudent to have those be on hold. The Transportation Demand Management, there are a couple of grants. The school pool grant, for example, is predicated on providing programs in the schools. We're not able to do that at this moment with the schools being closed. Salmon-friendly trips program we need to reevaluate. Traffic calming program, again, until we get a better sense of what is happening with people going back to work, I think it makes sense to leave that on hold as well. That concludes the mobility section. Again, given the changes with the closures of offices in the region, I think it makes mobility a difficult one to look at, and I think that as time passes, we'll have a better sense of which of these projects we'll be able to activate. And certainly the largest here, the Sound Transit project for light rail. Existing projects, existing construction has been shut down by Sound Transit, so I think that we'll need some additional time to get a sense of where things are at there. Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Should I go ahead?
Mayor Pauley, you're muted.
You probably saw the frustration on my face. Yes, City Administrator Bob Quibs, thank you for that. We have 3 questions lined up, starting with Councilmember DeMichelle, followed by Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I have, looking at the mobility arena, I want to put it in a bigger context and thinking about what has been demonstrated to us during the last 2 months. What's been demonstrated is the impacts and the benefits of reducing car travel. And what we've seen is an immense reduction in pollution. We see that we don't have congested roads, although that may not be a good thing because it means that nobody's going to work. We see fuel prices dropping, and I was listening in on a meeting where Claudia Balducci of the King County Council was commenting that we have a moment here where the general public has seen a demonstration that we never expected to see in our lifetime. And so I'm feeling urgency about mobility actions, and I certainly agree with Administrator Bobkowitz that we cannot do everything. But I would like to say that I would like us to do what we can, given the limited amount of information we have about what's going to happen. I would like to see us move forward with the Mass Mobility Plan, and I was very heartened to hear that there's plans to reconvene the Transportation Advisory Board, because I think that there is some thinking that we can be doing and some planning that we can be doing that will prepare us for when things start to turn around. And I think that we just do not want to lose this moment to explain to the public, here are things that we can do to give you alternatives to car travel. My second area of emphasis would be, I think that really we've got to look at what does Issaquah want from that Sound Transit terminal, and we could be spending time formulating and articulating that, even though we are in the midst of a tremendous reduction in the ability of Sound Transit to look at that issue. And then finally, the transportation demand management. Again, that's the area where we put out information to the public about alternatives to car travel. And we have 2 grants there that we need to spend the money. And so those would be the areas where I would like to see us look again and see if we can move forward. And I reiterate, that is in the context of knowing that we cannot do everything, but those would be my top 3 priorities in mobility. I'm just passionate about this idea that this is an unprecedented moment in our history, and it could make a huge difference in the way that we view transportation overall for decades to come. So that is the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I had a question about the status column of this table. And basically, my question is, can we please, maybe at our next meeting where we discuss this, can we please get information about the criteria that were used or the reasons, the rationale for the status having moved to one of these categories? I'm a little, I don't think right now we have enough information to really understand if things that are being put on hold, if it's possible for them to not be on hold. It seems like some things that are major challenges, for example, the transportation demand management, because that's dependent on the school pool and schools are closed, it seems that one cannot be moved, but that one is given as major challenges, whereas many other things are on hold. And so I think it would be very helpful, and I would request that we have information about what criteria are being used to group these by different statuses, and then also if it's possible or under what's the timeline under which this might change. That's my question, and it's probably for a future ask.
I'll just check in with City Administrator Bobkowitz and see if there's anything you want to add in at this point.
Sure. I wish I could tell you that there was a fine criteria, a scoring criteria for each of these, but there just isn't. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to use our best information that we have today about where we are, where our partners are, where we have staff and financial resources, and what you see is a compilation of that. We are committed to come back to the council if the council agrees to resume study sessions on June the 8th. We will have a refresh of this. We will add additional narrative. I think I've heard from many of you over the last few days looking for additional narrative of the decision-making process, but each one is different. We've never been through something like this, and we're trying to give the council and the community our best estimate. In some respects, perhaps we should have waited a month or 2 before even bringing this to you, but we didn't think that that was something that made sense. We wanted instead to make sure that the council had the administration's thinking right now of where we stood with things. So this is a work in progress, a document that will continue to evolve, and we have our commitment to come back next month with a further update.
We also have a question from Councilmember Walsh and followed by Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Walsh. My only question in the area of mobility is there anything that we need to be doing to take advantage of fewer cars being on the road, and also in preparation for school coming back potentially in the fall, related to the traffic calming program and some of the things that we've heard for Old Town? And the desire for there to be an improvement to a crosswalk there. Are those things that are easier done during times when society is shut down and that we should potentially move up even if we have limited resources?
I think, Councilmember Walsh, members of the council, that there are a couple components to that. If you recall, for example, with the Old Town traffic, there were some fixed lighting, some signage that we can move forward with. But there were other parts as far as intersection improvements that there was a desire by the council to see us do some mock-ups, some temporary installations of what would be proposed as permanent changes. I think those are harder to do without some semblance of regular traffic patterns. So our hope would be between now and June to sort through that a little bit more finely and have additional information for you then.
And Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Walsh and I are on the same wavelength. I was actually going to ask the exact same question. And understanding that it might be difficult to measure an experiment without traffic actually there, but identifying where, if administration sees any potential opportunities for doing planning work now, so that way we can execute quicker when the stay-home order is lifted. And in my mind, that means more residents and school children are safer. So just ditto what Councilmember Walsh said.
Thank you. Did you have a second question or just one?
Nope. Okay. The city administrative outputs answered it, so thank you.
Okay, thanks. Not seeing any more questions. I think, city administrator, you can move to the next area.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. If we could go to the next slide. This is the Growth and Development Council goal. Again, this first page has a summary of the change of where we see projects. Again, much like the mobility, a significant change from those that were on track at the beginning of the first quarter to those that are either major challenges or in delay. Next slide. Objective 1 deals with neighborhoods retaining their charm and distinctive character, pattern, and setting. That includes both built and natural environments. GD1A deals with updating codes and standards to retain and protect essential characteristics in established neighborhoods. The Old Town neighborhood process we've talked about, as the council will recall. We've had some discussions that regarding the Old Town design work that were done. This has been largely on hold because of the community engagement piece that will need to continue to require, as I mentioned earlier, for several of these that will require additional community engagement. Mayor Pauly has asked that we move forward beginning June 1st to begin reconvening community discussions on various topics, assuming that there is no prohibition by the governor on that. And so I would suspect that we will be able to restart GD1A this summer. GD2A, conduct a review of progress towards growth targets. This is also something that we had been working on very diligently prior to the COVID-19 crisis. We had submitted initial information to King County for their process to review growth targets. That process has also been suspended at this time. I believe we've gotten some initial information that it will be moving forward again soon. So we would hope to be back to you with additional information in June. GD2E, proactively influence the next round of regional growth targets. Again, this is complementary to GD2A. We continue to have information ready for this. We see this as major challenges because there is still some additional work done in anticipation of King County beginning its process. But again, not knowing when that will occur makes it a major challenge. Objective 3, GD3A, create a comprehensive infrastructure master plan to address development areas planned for growth. This is also on hold for a variety of reasons. I think largely we need to get a better sense of the impacts on development that the COVID-19 crisis will be bringing on. We've also had some changes in staffing in our Public Works Department, and as we look at a reorganization of Public Works, hopefully effective June 1, that we'll have a better ability to restart this process. So I would imagine we'll have additional information for the council in June. Next slide. Update impact and mitigation fees to support growth-rated investments. This is one of the few that we can say are completed. This was done by the council earlier this year with park impact fees. Objective 4, across the city, there are a variety of public amenities, housing types, education, and other services that contribute to a livable community. Identify and implement code changes and activities to address neighborhood-based and community-wide gaps in amenities and services. Again, this was to be a pilot effort to be conducted in Issaquah Highlands neighborhood. Given the COVID-19 crisis, we've not been able to have any kind of community meetings, and so our hope would be is that in June we would begin working with DSD staff to identify ways to move that pilot project forward. GD4B, develop code amendments to address missing middle and other housing options. Again, lots is changing with housing. The missing middle piece is the key element here. It's our recommendation that, again, we let a little bit more time pass to get a sense of where things are at with affordable housing to make sure that the missing middle is the area that we want to address in 2020. So I would hope that we would have some additional information as soon as June, likely probably later in the summer. But again, we'll look for the council's direction on this as we move forward. Next page. These are other areas of concern that we were looking at. One is to include flow charts explaining project approval process. Again, one of our commitments is to do that with everything we do. So as additional projects move forward, we want to continue to include flow charts with that. The Title 18 work would also be part of that. We need to talk a little bit more about Title 18, and I would ask Madam Mayor that perhaps as part of questions, Andrea Schneider, the Deputy City Administrator, can speak specifically to where we are with Title 18. Contractor Code of Conduct, again, something that has been suggested by Deputy Council President Ray, which I think is something I heard in my initial weeks as City Administrator from many community members. Again, I think this has just been a availability of staff, and I think once the time passes a little bit further, we'll be able to get this project back on track. Finish the overhaul of municipal code, Title 18. Again, I'd ask Andrea Schneider to address this during the question time period. Actually, Madam Mayor, perhaps it would make sense if Andrea is on the line, we can just have her chime in right now on Title 18, since that's a large portion of the growth and development priority.
I think that would be good, and then we'll follow up. If you're done after Andrea, we'll follow up with a question from Councilmember Hall. Deputy City Administrator Schneider.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So we have been working for the past several months with the Council Ad Hoc Committee on Title 18. What we're putting forward with this work plan revision is that the work continue on Title 18 that's related to the sign code overhaul. As many of you are aware, there have been recent court cases about the First Amendment and how many cities, Issaquah among them, our sign code doesn't necessarily meet the standards set forward by the court case in order to protect First Amendment rights. And so we need to update the sign code. That work has been underway by one of our consultant teams. Actually, Ogden Murphy Wallace has been assisting us with that. And so we would like to proceed with that work. And really that work alone, while we put the rest of the Title 18 revisions on hold. And knowing that there are many policies in Title 18 that we had planned on addressing this year that are of great import to the community, that they would want to weigh in on and be engaged on these topics. And then that's going to be difficult to do for the next couple of months. So we wanted to be able to put that off to allow us to have community conversations and engage the public as it makes sense. The rest of the project for Title 18 and revising the code and policies within, we would consider looking at revisiting again in 2021.
Thank you, Deputy City Administrator. Councilmember Hall, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Hall. Question for City Administrator Bobkowitz. Under sub-objective GD4B, which was the one on missing middle housing and other affordable housing options, you had mentioned something about wanting to wait to study where things are at regarding affordable housing. I was wondering if you could just kind of explain what you meant by that. Is it the market we want to look at, or what exactly would we want to wait to look at?
Well, I think given where we are with the stay-at-home order, given where we are with allowing existing construction to move forward, given where we are with many people finding themselves out of work, there's a lot of issues floating around, and I would think that to get a better sense of what our affordable housing needs are, we took $100,000 and put it toward rental assistance just in the last 6-8 weeks. So I don't see this being a long time to look and review, but I don't know that we have enough time passing with the crisis that we're still in the midst of to give us a better sense of where things are. And I'd like to come back in June and see if we have a better sense. We may want to move forward with this regardless and focus on the missing middle piece, knowing that there will be other issues. But I think as we sit here at the beginning of May, I don't know that we know enough yet to say we should be expending resources to move forward with this.
Councilmember Hall, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you. So it seems like the bottom line really is we're just not sure if this, we don't know enough, to quote you, we don't know enough to be able to justify spending resources on this yet in this new environment we're in. Am I hearing you right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. I dropped off the call. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. We also have Council President Hunt.
I have two questions. One of them is about the last statement that was made about potentially revisiting some of our policies around affordable housing. And I feel that if council is going to revisit policies that we've adopted previously, that I think applies to potentially this missing middle, because I think it's in our housing strategy work plan, and as well as the retention of affordable housing, which I know is in our housing strategy work plan and is adopted by council. I think if we're going to revisit those, that should be done in a very transparent manner with an understanding of what information there is to support revisiting that. And right now, other than what was just said by the city administrator, I don't have information on how the market has changed or why we might not consider pursuing those previously adopted policies. So I think that's a pretty big step, and I think we should have a lot more information before we would go that way. I also have a question. So for community engagement, a lot of things went from being on track to being on hold, and I understand that's having to do with the in-person meetings. So the timeline for having those be back on track would be when the in-person meetings is lifted. But I also did wonder if there are plans to have virtual meetings or other kinds of community meetings in other venues that we might use during this time to maintain momentum on some topics, especially because people might be interested in engaging on different topics at this time.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council President Hunt. As I mentioned earlier in conversations with Mayor Pauly just today, we both came to the same realization that we can't wait for in-person meetings any longer. And I think over the last few weeks, we were trying to get a better sense of what a time frame might even be for virtual meetings, video meetings. I think the governor's plan for phased approaches gives us some sense of that. And it was the mayor's decision that we would try to move forward with virtual community meetings beginning in June. So that is what our plan will be. We'll kind of test it out with the mayor's recovery task force and see how that's going. We're looking at a platform other than Skype for Business to use for community meetings, because many community members just the couple who have tried to use it, depending on the computer you have, it may not work very well. Just the council members, as you've all prepared to use it for council meetings, we've had some difficulties. So, Mayor Pauly decided today that unless the governor makes other plans for us, that we would start on June 1st. The Rivers and Streams convening that was delayed, we would like to move forward with. There's a few other things that we would do as soon as possible after June 1.
Does that answer your question, Council President Hunt?
Yes.
Thank you. City Administrator Bob Quist, do you want to move to the next section?
Sure. I'll just, before I do that, there were just the last couple of items there regarding Lake Sammamish State Park, and we'd already talked about Old Town Issaquah. I think I explained the Old Town piece, and then the Lake Sammamish Park. Again, I think it's just been with state offices working from home. We would revisit this soon and hopefully have an update for you in June. Going on to the next area is environmental stewardship. An important piece of what we're doing moving forward. Again, I think given the current crisis, we need to rethink some of our timeframes from that. And so if we look at the first objective, natural environment is protected and improved in a consistent, responsible, and sustainable manner. As we look to move forward with Title 18, certainly we're looking to make changes there. Some additional actions would take a comprehensive look across the city and other relevant agency, environmental resource plans, development agreements, codes, programs, and policies to identify gaps and vulnerabilities. We hope that we would be able to continue moving forward with that. As you know, Megan will be moving forward with the Office of Sustainability. That will convert from a department to under the administration. Megan will report directly to me, and so this is something that she'll be able to work on as we move forward. Objective 2, community members are active partners in the stewardship of Issaquah's environment. Again, given the stay-at-home order, getting volunteer initiatives going is going to be difficult until that lifts. So we will keep an eye on the time frame of the Governor Inslee's changes in letting having people gather, and we'll be able to move forward with that at that point. Objective 3, the city acquires strategic lands for park, trail, open space, critical areas, natural resource protection to maximize community benefits. Again, this is largely a staff resource issue, as well as just the time to engage the community in these discussions, and so hopefully we'll have a better sense of things come June. Looking at critical service items and timely opportunities, the Shoreline Master Plan, again, we believe under the governor's current open meeting law changes that anything but the most urgent matters can't come before council until that is lifted. We're hoping to get additional guidance from the state legislature today on that, and so we would bring that back for further discussion at such time that those requirements are lifted. The Community Climate Action Plan, again, an important project for the year. We're planning an in-person convening. We are going to move forward and do a virtual convening. We are working with a citizen group that has been working on the convening. They are continuing to meet through the COVID crisis by telephone, and we would look to have a virtual climate convening sometime. I think we're looking at the first part of July at this point. The Community Sustainability Summit, that is, again, connected with the Community Climate Action Planning, that same convening to move forward with the Climate Action Plan. The Sustainability Summit would be a portion of that. Again, planning is continuing with that, looking for a convening during the month of July. Implementing sustainable building strategies, addressing city facilities and new development. This is with major challenges given where we are with Title 18. There is work that also needs to be done on Title 16. My hope is, again, at our June update, we'll be able to give the council a better status of where we are with that. Next is the Sustainability Living Partnership. These are programs that we had planned. We were planning a very large Earth Day celebration. We are looking for other programs and activities that we would be able to implement in lieu of the Earth Day celebration. Again, as soon as we're able to congregate folks, we're also looking at ways that we can, perhaps later in the summer, continue to connect people virtually to these issues. Next is electrical vehicle infrastructure. We were looking at some public-private partnerships there. Just as recently as today, Ms. Curtis Murphy and I were talking about ways to begin work on this project once again. So we will absolutely have plans for next steps when we provide you the next update in June. So again, with the budget reductions we have made, we have had to streamline our approach to environmental stewardship and sustainability. I'm very confident under Megan Curtis Murphy's leadership that we'll be able to continue to engage with the public, keep these things going in a way that I think is responsive to the council and community needs. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have Council President Hunt with a question.
Thank you. I have a question about where Parks and Recreation reopening would fit into this work plan.
It does not specifically work into the work plan. We are looking very carefully each day as things change and we get closer through the governor's phased approach for reopening, how uses of our parks, how organized recreational activity, how larger gatherings would take place. We don't know enough at this point to have a time in place.
Okay. So I think that sort of along the same lines as my context question before, I think that having some information about a lot of things have changed around the work plan, and we now have a different set of challenges than we had when we initially adopted the work plan. I think we need more information about the things that we will need to be working on and that the administration knows and expects we will be working on that we didn't foresee before, because that's also a piece of the context that has changed that seems to be missing.
And we've not talked about a process for adding things. The administration has added one area with public safety. And so, Madam Mayor, I would look to your guidance and direction as to a process for, adding additional items if you would like the council to make suggestions, and then we will consider those suggestions or have that at a future meeting. So, Madam Mayor, I would look for whatever thoughts you have on that subject.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, a good point by Council President. There are a lot of programs and things that we used to have in place that were not on this list of strategic plan items moving the needle. So, and they've stopped, or they've been paused, or they may not even come back this year. So we will have to have some additional conversations about that. There's also a question from Council Member Hall.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, just one other comment on that before we get off it. I think that your recovery task force will likely come up with its own list of issues, and so perhaps after a few meetings of the recovery task force, if they have a list, maybe there's somehow to incorporate whatever issues that they've identified into this work plan. So, perhaps by June, there'll be a few meetings of the task force under our belt when we report back on June 8th. So there may be information at that point.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Councilmember Hall, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Polly. This is Zach Hall. I had a question about Objective 2, which was community members are active partners in the stewardship of Issaquah's environment. Beyond actually having volunteers out and violating the governor's orders, it seems like there is some gathering work that we could be doing if there's staff time. I know there's a link on the website to apply to be a volunteer, but perhaps communications could be getting that out. And I think the website also says one of the objectives of this partnership is to gather public input on the values, interests, and priorities surrounding forested parks and open spaces. It seems to me like some of that could be done virtually. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, and really if it is just a staff time issue and staff time could be better spent elsewhere. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that too.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I'm going to phone a friend and ask Megan Kurtz-Murphy, our sustainability coordinator, to chime. I know that she has been talking with folks about the convening that we hope to have, which will largely be focused on climate action, but I know we'll address some larger issues as well. Megan, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yes, I think as you were saying, we are trying to get a little bit more going in the virtual convening world. So of course we won't be able to get people together for a while, but we've been hearing that volunteering is a priority in the city, and we're hoping to continue that work moving forward as we get people together. And at the climate convening that we talked about that we'll be holding later in the summer, we can talk about some of that work as well and start to prioritize that.
Megan, can you talk a little bit about what you've done with some of our stakeholder groups?
Sure. So we've been meeting with a couple of our local groups to plan the climate convening, and then also we've been talking with some of the local nonprofit organizations just to check in about how things are going in this new COVID world that we are living in, checking on how organizations are dealing with events that they may have been planning, moving that to virtual, trying to help provide resources, mostly in the form of information. Some of the same things that's been going out to some of the businesses is available to nonprofits as well. So working closely with all of those groups and making sure we stay in coordination and communication during this time so that we can bring the best programs to Issaquah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I do not see any other questions on that section, City Administrator Balkowitz, so you may move on.
Thank you. The next section is social and economic vitality. probably among the strategic plan areas that have had the most impact. The COVID-19 crisis has had the most impact on, as far as I think requiring us to pivot some of the work that we're doing. Again, this slide gives you just a graphic overview of some of the changes that we've had to make. If you look at objective 1, next page, an increase in new and existing businesses that chose to locate and expand in Issaquah, especially those with wage levels, enable workers also to live in the community. This is something that, as you know, council members, Jen Davis-Hayes has been working daily since the crisis began to work with our employers and businesses in town. One of the ways we have been using dollars is through the Port of Seattle grant funds that we have. I think we are waiting really for the dust to settle to have a better sense of what we need to do here. And if we need to make additional changes, I think we are going to need to focus more in the near term on retention than we are business recruitment. And so we have worked with the Port of Seattle to make sure that there's flexibility in those grant funds. So if we need to reprogram them, we'll be able to do that. And again, my hope would be in June, we'd have a better opportunity to give you an update on how we might work to program them. SC1C, expand support for small business and startup training and development. This is a great example of how we have pivoted with our Startup 425 initiative, which is a co-branded initiative with several of the East King County communities. That's now known as Restartup 425. And so the money that has been previously allocated there is going toward this initiative and is being used to, again, to focus on providing business assistance specifically for those businesses that will be able to start once the stay-at-home order is there. So we're only looking at minor challenges on that front. Objective 2, housing affordability, better meets the needs of individuals and families across the income spectrum to live and work in the community. This deals again with our housing strategies and our healthy community strategy. We are again looking to let the dust settle a little bit here before we are able to move forward. We've certainly had staffing issues with the staff that deal with both human services and affordable housing. So our hope is that we would be able to get this restarted here shortly and have additional information to you in June. Number SE2C, next page, determine if city property assets should be for affordable housing, related to a assessment of city-owned properties that was done last year. This was something that we were working on the administrative side to bring back to the council this spring, but because of the COVID-19 crisis, we placed that on hold. I think this is a policy decision really for the council to decide when you'd like to bring this back. I think there's also a concern as to when we would want to talk about the sale of city assets. My sense is that we're a little early in the process to be looking at the sale of city assets. Certainly, before any sale of assets, one of the things we want to talk about with the council is a process and procedure for the assessment of when a property should be sold and what are the key points that would be needed in order to move forward with the sale. So this is on hold, and perhaps in June we can talk more about when an appropriate time would be to bring that back. The SE3B, the Healthy Community Strategy, again, something that we presented to the council a few months back. We've really been living this right now and trying to deal with direct community needs. And so while staff is focused on that, I think that additional planning for the future is probably a little premature, and we'll bring that back for future discussion and updates as we can. SE3C, facilitate nonprofit organizations to locate or expand to provide needed services locally. Again, we've been working day to day with our nonprofits to support the delivery of services. Again, not quite what we thought of when we were looking at this on the strategic plan, but we'll continue to work in this new environment to the best of our abilities and perhaps double back on some of these particular points in the months ahead. Transit-oriented development, TODOC project. I think it would be appropriate once again to call a friend. Deputy City Administrator Andrea Schneider has been working on this project. And Andrea, if you wouldn't mind just providing a brief update on where we
stand. Good evening again. This is on the TODOC project, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say. So we are in continued conversations with CenturyLink and our development partners, and including a phone call. I think they're having some internal meetings this week, tomorrow, in fact. So we do anticipate hearing from them again by the end of this week. What we're trying to assess from them is their support of the drafted purchase and sale agreement, which would include the property swap that would occur between CenturyLink, the city, and our development partners. And so we have a draft of that. We're trying to see if CenturyLink, what their comments on that draft might be. That's currently underway. So we anticipate, or we are still planning to have a signed agreement between all three parties, certainly by the end of July is what's needed for our time frame.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrea. And I'm just now seeing comments about my audio. I'll try to speak a little bit more directly into the microphone. The next item was senior discounts, low-income outreach programs. Again, in the current situation, perhaps not exactly what we thought, but certainly we continue that outreach as best as we can for those that are in need. Issues of homelessness. Again, I think we may need to look at new approaches for this, and as we are still in the midst of the crisis, I think that as time passes, we'll have a better sense of what we need to continue to do in the area of homelessness. Community equity and diversity initiatives. A lot of the training that we were providing, both our staff and individual staff members and groups of staff members, has either stopped temporarily or required people to be in group gatherings. So we are going to have to re-examine that as we move forward, but certainly remain committed to providing that training both for our employees, but also to work with members in the community. Next page. Economic Development Plan. We had planned a convening this spring.
Could I get you to go back to, actually, let me just check in with Councilmember DuMichel. Can your comment or question wait till the end of this section, Barb?
Yes. Yeah, I just didn't want it to get lost. Thanks.
Not lost. Thank you very much for checking in. So continue, City Administrator. We have a couple of questions for you at the end.
Great. This is the last page on social and economic vitality. The Economic Development Plan, again, given all that's going on, the ability to get businesses to focus on this, I think is going to be delayed for some time, but we will look at an opportunity to do a virtual convening if we can later in the summer. Economic Development Community Outreach, again, we continue to do that. The stakeholder groups continue to meet. I think we'll just need to look at what that looks like in the new environment. Our Sports Medicine Innovation Partnership Zone project is on hold given the current crisis. Our wayfinding entry signage project is on hold for dollar savings as well as staffing resources. And a revisiting of our special events, 4th of July Salmon Days, holiday lighting in Old Town at the end of the year. I think we just need to wait and see as we reopen for business following the governor's guidance, what we're able to do there, and we'll keep the council posted. So that, Madam Mayor, concludes the social and economic vitality area.
Thank you very much, City Administrator Bob Quiz. Councilmember DuMichel, followed by Councilmember Marks.
Here we go. Very briefly, SG1C, I very much support looking at retention of our businesses and how we can support our businesses during this time. And I think we've been doing a good job on that. I think the way that we treat our businesses now in the midst of a crisis will go a long way when we start to recover toward attracting new businesses to our area. So I commend that. On the SE3C, which is rethinking and looking at our human services providers and our funding model for human services, we've had a model for a long time, and it's a model that I have supported strongly of providing relatively small amounts of money to our local human services providers, and then they have been responsible for raising the bulk of their money. And that model has worked well for us for a long time, and it has many things to commend it. The COVID-19 crisis has revealed to us, however, that at the moment when many, many people are needing services is the time when our human services funding model has pretty much collapsed. And I'm thinking of the Food and Clothing Bank and HopeLink and Friends of Youth have all stated in public that they are in dire straits. And so I think looking at this model that we've had for a long time and looking at the benefits of that model, and then looking at what do we do at the point of emergency, what can we do to perhaps have reserve funds for those organizations. This is something that will need a lot of thought, but I certainly think that we need to look at the funding model in light of the emergency that we are going through at this point. And that's my comment there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember D. Michelle. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I always get thrown. It's a two-stage process to get that video going. So one of the things I wanted to comment was, there's talk about when we can reassess some of these things, and I tend to be a little bit cautious about setting expectations about when things can get reevaluated. I mean, June is 4 weeks away, and we will be very lucky if we've moved to phase 2 based on the state level dashboards. And so one of the things I think to think about in all this is the recovery from COVID-19 is going to take a while. And some of these things may become evident, soon after businesses are able to restart, and others may take quite some time. So I think I would love to see sort of the same way that we have a phased reopening of, removal of social distancing, perhaps a phased review of these, because I think some of these aren't going to be anywhere near ready to go in kind of a June timeframe. We're just not going to know very much more than we know now. Even if we're very, very lucky and we come out of phase 1 on May 25th, I don't think we're really going to know the lay of the land for some time, like at least another month. So I would just ask that we think about. I'm not requesting anything formal, but I just think we should think about a phased review of these holds as for when we really have useful information. I think doing it too soon wouldn't be of very much value. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Councilmember Goodman, followed by Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. So I'm looking at the very last, the very last item in the social and economic vitality, and that's the special events plan. 4th of July, Salmon Days, holiday lighting. So as I think about Salmon Days and the Chamber of Commerce, it's my understanding that Salmon Days is the major fundraiser for the Chamber of Commerce, significant financial opportunity and maybe the most important fundraiser or revenue producer for the chamber. And I don't have any idea if any conversations are taking place between the city and the chamber, and I don't need an answer. My only thought is that I'm guessing that Salmon Days is on the mind of the chamber board right now, and that I would, if we haven't already, it might be worth reaching out to the chamber to see if there's anything that the city could be doing to just help in that effort, or just learn what challenges that the chamber might be facing that the city might be able to assist with. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a good point. And actually, I just want to add one thing in for both you and Councilmember Martz's comment that he made earlier. It is a phased reopening. It's hard to say what something's going to look like when you don't have guidelines. It's hard to say if it's economical for the chamber to run a fair where the booths have to be 10 feet apart and only so many people can be on a certain section of road. And so it will be a learning period over the next 3 to 4 months as these guidances get issued. Organizations are going to have to make some tough decisions on whether or not, with guidance, it even makes sense for them to run the event that they would like to run, the way they would like to run it. So thank you both. Those are good comments, and it does sort of paint the picture of what we're doing going forward. It's not turn on, turn off. It is very much a dial. So thank you for that. And we have Councilmember Hall as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Zach Hall. Real quick, just point of clarification. Can someone just confirm regarding homelessness? Can someone just confirm that our new human services funding model, the pilot program that we voted on earlier this year, hasn't been impacted? Especially recognizing that homelessness might be a much more profound issue post COVID-19.
City Administrator
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hall, no, there's been no change to that pilot program.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this section, or we will be moving on? Looks like we are good to move on.
All right, our next section is city leadership and services. Again, will not belabor the summary here. Again, we'll look at the first item, CS1A, implement new and enhanced public outreach strategies, building upon a review of engagement efforts and updates to the city's toolkit on public engagement. This is something that we also had planned to talk about with the council a few times since the beginning of the year and have not been able to do that. We're very committed to moving forward with these new initiatives with citizen engagement. We have an excellent communications team led by Assistant to the City Administrator, Autumn Monahan. She will continue to lead her team through these. Likely not going to have a city council meeting in the neighborhoods anytime soon, but we do want to continue to work more closely with the neighborhoods to have not just communication staff, but council members, the mayor, myself, other senior staff be involved, connected with neighborhoods. Mayor Pauly is beginning a series of video meetings with neighborhoods this week, which will continue moving forward. So we see some minor challenges here, but our commitment to community engagement has never been stronger. We have an outstanding group of tools that we use, and we will continue to use them moving forward. Next is working with the community to identify and remove barriers, accessing city programs and services. Again, the ability to do that in this environment, I think, is limited, and we are going to need to I think have a little bit more time before we know what a time frame would be to go back to that. The same with equity and cultural competency for the city staff. We talked a little bit about this in the previous goal with the community. The same issues are with our city staff as far as the availability of training during this period. And so once we have a better sense of meeting restrictions being lifted and organizations that have provided this training, once again, resuming the training, we'll be able to do some more in that area. Next page, please. Improvements regarding employee experience, fostering development, organizational values, and connections. This also has major challenges. Some of this has an in-person meeting component. This has a component of us actually being at work. We've tried, even in this time of being separate, of using the video meetings. We've had a couple of happy hours to try to connect staff, but I think really we're going to need to spend some time in the future rethinking how we can do this in what might be a remote working environment for some time to come. Next is to evaluate the condition and performance of current city facilities and options for improving service delivery. Again, this seems a little outmoded. Just 60 days ago, it didn't seem outmoded at all. And I think we're going to need to look at when we are able to reopen city offices. We'll be doing it certainly on a limited basis. I think this gives a whole new look to planning. I know that we have money on account through development fees for city facilities, so that will also have to be taken into account. But at this point, I think a little bit more time needs to pass before we're able to have a good sense of what our facility needs will be in the future. Customer service standards, again, difficult given the remote nature of our work. We are looking at a new customer relation management system, and that remains on track, and we hope to have that implemented here in the next few months. That has been delayed because of other matters. Financial information to be accessible, clear, and available on a regular basis. This really is our Munis reset project. There is a contract later on the agenda this evening, and I will be happy to answer any questions, but we'll go through that in a few minutes when we get to that item. Next page. Other critical service items and timely opportunities, performance measurement. Our hope is to re-engage with the Bloomberg Foundation and begin work on our performance measurement program. We have brought on a new staff member who will be joining us full-time. He's working part-time as he finishes up his master's degree at the University of Washington. He'll be joining us full-time soon, and he will be working on that. I think that the opportunities for performance measurement in a time of limited resources is a really tremendous opportunity for us to look very deeply at the work that we do. So excited that we'll be able to keep that moving forward. Strategic plan implementation reporting. It was our hope to produce an annual report by June 30. Now hopeful to do that by the end of the summer, and then the annual reports cycles. Again, this work plan review is a quarterly report, and we'll do that again in June. The city assessment of services, for better or worse, looking at our budget in the last few weeks has made us move that process up. We are looking at a review of our Public Works Department, and we'll be back to the council with recommendations on the 18th of May of Public Works. We are looking now at development services, reduction of staff, additional organizational rearrangement there, which we'll hopefully report back to the council shortly. There remains great interest in the council on issues regarding our jail, how we best deploy the police department, and our contracts for municipal court services. And as we detailed as part of the budget discussions over the last few weeks, those evaluations will continue. There were other items, other assessments that were identified, most of which are going to take additional time for us to look at. We are, of course, engaged with Issaquah Fire and Rescue regarding their current year costs, so that will continue. City boards and commissions, I think Mayor Pauly at the beginning of the meeting this evening highlighted where we stand with boards and commissions. There's some additional work there that will continue. The more substantial work was indicated at the beginning of the year, I think will continue later in the year. Our classification compensation study, again, that has been accelerated, where we'd hoped to institute the changes for 21. Our hope is that we will be able to do that as part of a budget solution for 2020. The criminal justice contract services we've talked about, support for mayor, city council, regional board service. Many of these boards are on hiatus, but we have staff assigned and will continue to support the council on these regional boards. City, state, regional, county relations. Certainly, we've had a much closer relationship with King County over the last several weeks. We hope to continue that close relationship moving forward. Our use of our state legislative advocate has also been in place during this crisis. The council did create or ask to reinvigorate a planning committee with the school board. That committee met just before the COVID crisis hit at the beginning of March. We hope to get that group together again soon. The automated agenda process, those issues are continuing with the clerk. They're evaluating the best next steps there. We should hopefully have an update for you in June. The records retention, probably a little bit long timeline on coming back with next steps there. Public records fee update, again, hope to do that sometime during the course of 2020 for the 2021 fiscal year budget. Next page, please. Improvements to the website. Many of those were done. There are additional things, most of the online utility billing that we're going to see some delays, but otherwise, we hope to continue to move forward over the next few months with those initiatives. The bond sale in support of the city's capital program is on track and is nearly completed. Plan for negotiate labor agreements. We continue to work diligently on all these agreements, so those all remain on track. Review and revise human resource policy documents, so that is on hold, largely given staff resources. Implement new software to automate the municipal court, that remains on track. The solid waste collection agreement, the council did make some decisions on that to extend the agreement. Our next step will be to conduct a container weighing study, and then we added two city leadership and services section on the Issaquah Recovery Board, actually Issaquah Recovery Task Force, and that group will begin meeting this week. So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, that covers city leadership and services. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll give it a few seconds. I don't see any questions queued up at this point in time. I might move, there we go, Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. I know I asked this over email, but just putting it out there that I'd like to get a sense, as we know more about many of these on hold or major challenge items that actually have budgeted dollars in the 2020 budget, if we are not going to spend them, what that fund looks like and what we might look to use it for otherwise. But again, I recognize staff time and we don't have all the answers now. It's just something to consider as we go forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Let me let the city administrator talk about that, because I believe you may have seen some of these savings already reflected in the first phase one of our budget cuts. The Administrator Buckowitz?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and I'm sorry I don't have an easy way to put up a spreadsheet with this information, but we do have a table which I can provide the council later about each of the items that had money listed in them, the fund, and those savings that are already captured. So a number of them have already been captured as part of the phase one budget savings, and rather than go through them line by line here, Madam Mayor, I'll just go ahead and make this available to the council.
Thank you. If I understood your question correctly, Councilmember Walsh, you were assuming that there would potentially be some additional savings or funds that were not allocated. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, and I guess just knowing the whole picture as it relates to either things that you've already accounted for in the budget adjustment versus things that we might have some underspend that hasn't been accounted for that we could address.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, but I am going to ask Council President Hunt to see if there were any email comments received by Council this week related to this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt. We did receive emails on this topic. So I will summarize to the best of my ability those emails in a few sentences per email. We received the email from Connie Marsh, and Connie wrote about the need for better fact delivery, transparency in the decision-making process, and providing a clear view of what success is with this work plan. Steve Pereira wrote to us expecting further details on each work plan on the corresponding statement of work and corresponding costs for each associated item. And he wrote that providing such detail is necessary to help Issaquah residents understand what they get and will not get if such items do not proceed. Also, that there should be a larger emphasis on environmental stewardship. Corey Christensen wrote that the work plan chart was lacking in two major topic areas, parks and recreation and reopening. And also on environment, he expressed disappointment given how much council prioritized environment to see many of the work plan items related to it to be put on hold. Mary Lynch wrote to us about the importance. Oh, I have a lot of background. Okay. Mary Lynch wrote to us about the importance of utilizing all of the vast resources of people that we have in our community to help us move forward. And this could be paying jobs as well as volunteer labor to help rebuild our economy and recover back our healthy, sustainable community. And she also expressed concern about a number of the work plan items that are now on hold, wanting to ensure that the city can provide better service to the public in light of the pandemic. And that concludes the correspondence that we received directly on this item from the public.
Thank you. Are there any other additional questions or comments on this item?
Madam Mayor,
City Administrator?
there's still two sections remaining.
There you go. Go ahead. And actually, take a pause. It looks like Council President Hunt has a comment.
Madam Mayor, I have an overall comment, so I'll hold until the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the same with Councilmember DeMichelle when City Administrator's done. Go ahead, City Administrator.
Thank you. And again, I realize this is taking a long time. I think in the name of transparency for everyone, I think it's so important that people understand exactly where we're at. And I appreciate the council's indulgence as we walk through this. The infrastructure goal, again, the summary sheet there, the next slide, objective 1, plan operations and maintenance costs with all new capital, including both city developed and dedicated. Again, I think just given the current crisis, this is not something we've been able to focus on. We're not planning yet the capital improvement process for 21, but we will be shortly, and we will be able to look at that at this point. Other critical services, city properties for potential surplusing. Again, we talked a little bit about this earlier. The 2020 capital improvement projects. Once we get through the phase 2 budget reductions, we'll be able to come back with a more comprehensive update on 2020 capital projects. So we hope to have that for you in June. The water supply infrastructure and rates, again, a project that we had hoped to give the council an update on during the month of May. We're now looking, I believe, at a July date to come back to the council for further discussions there. Storm and surface water master plan. We've already talked a little bit about that, and we will be looking at dates to bring that back to the council when we're able to have larger discussions. City Hall facilities, short, medium, and long-range planning. I think we've also talked a little bit about that as well. And so that's a very quick overview of the infrastructure items. Madam Mayor, if there's any questions.
Thank you, City Administrator. We do have a couple questions. We'll start with Council President Hunt, followed by Councilmember DeMichelle.
This is Council President Hunt. I have no questions.
I'm assuming then it's for, so we'll go to...
Madam Mayor, I see that it's Councilmember Hall.
Yes, Councilmember Hall. Thanks.
Thank you both. This is Zach Hall. You talked about the CIP, and so my mind went right to the TIP. And so I just have a quick question about that. Does administration, are we worried about, I think it's due like, isn't it July 31 or something like that? Are we worried about, reassessing our needs and modifying our needs for the TIP? Your thoughts?
Councilmember Hall, members of the council, we're still looking at that, and I think we'll be able to get you a better answer at a future date.
City Administrator, if you want to keep going, we do have two that are signed up to make comments at the end. So next section.
Great. And really just the last piece, the work plan did not have a section on public safety. And so the administration is proposing that we add to the work plan items regarding public safety, given the current crisis, given the financial issues we're dealing with, the operational issues we're dealing with. We'd like to keep this to the on the council's minds at the forefront of issues. So there's three items here. One is our 2020 contract issues with Eastside Fire and Rescue. They are having a board meeting next week to consider the letter that Mayor Pauley sent. I think it's important that we keep a close eye on those discussions as well as discussions for fiscal 21 for EFR, and so would add that. The police department, again, we've been looking very carefully at police department operations during this crisis and our ability to continue to have proper staffing. I think it's important to continue to look at the staffing and the classifications that we use in the police department more so now than ever. And so that is something we'll continue to be looking at. We'll keep you posted as we begin to review that. And then finally, the jail and court reviews. So this was not part of the strategic plan. It was not part of the work plan. I believe, Mayor Pauley believes that given the current financial crisis that certainly we're facing, we have only identified what we think are half of the reductions that we will need to balance our budget. And so to not keep a careful eye on our public safety, which is about half of our general fund budget, we think it's appropriate and prudent to add that. So, Madam Mayor, let me just say thank you again to you and the council for your patience as we've gone through this. Our plan is to ask the council to meet in a study session, the first study session since the COVID crisis began on June 8th, where we will provide an opportunity to review this plan as well as begin discussions for our fiscal 2021 budget preparation. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, City Administrator Bobkowitz. We have a question from Councilmember Goodman, and then we will go to some comments because there are a couple of council members who have general comments. So, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. And I guess I put it down as a question, but maybe it's kind of a question comment. The last edition of public safety, we had a couple of questions from the public, one of them about why we don't have Parks and Rec on here. And I just think we have to be cognizant if we're trying to have this work plan be something that tracks the strategic plan, but yet we're going to make an exception, then I think we need to figure out whether we're going to start making exceptions for other things as well that we consider to be important. So it's more of a comment than anything. Thanks.
Thank you. Question from Council President Hunt.
Related to Councilmember Goodman's comments, I also wondered about the last items on the public safety part of the work plan that have been added, because it seems to me, and maybe you can confirm, that those items were already on the work plan, especially the one about the assessment of services. And so it was on the work plan, but wasn't called out in its own section. So I'm wondering, I guess my question is it substantially different than what was part of the work plan previously and was in the strategic plan?
City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Clearly, the issues with Eastside Fire and Rescue aren't. And so I think are very important to look at. I think what this is, what the civil emergency has caused with the police department is that our police department has been asked to take on non-traditional roles, sending police officers out to parks to enforce the governor's social distancing. I think if this is going to be a part of our longer range role for the police department, do we need to look at different kinds of classifications to do that? So that was not previously contemplated. Again, public safety being such a large part of our budget, to not have that as a focused area of the work plan, I think is a missed opportunity. Again, we'll certainly follow Mayor Pauly's lead, but I think we don't focus enough on issues and costs associated with public safety, and I think given our budgetary issues, we really need to do that moving forward.
Thank you.
Talking to myself again. Sorry about that. I have 3 council members lined up for comments. Council President Hunt, Council Member DiMichele, Council Member Martz. So Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I wanted to be clear about what I was talking about earlier with my ask for the next time that this information comes forward. And I am not looking for a reevaluation of the status of the different items that has been changed. I think the status likely, as was pointed out, it's only a few weeks away that we'll be looking at these items again according to our schedule that we have now. So I don't expect the status will necessarily change or that we'll have that much more information. But what a lot of information was provided verbally to us about why items are given the status that they are. And that's really what I'm looking for, because I think it's an important piece of the decision-making process. And so while that information was given to us verbally, it wasn't documented and it wasn't for all of the items. So I would like to see that. I think it's especially important because for some of the items, they were put on hold because we might consider as a council changing our policy, such as the affordable housing ones. Or for some of these, it was put on hold because there's an external circumstance that makes it such that we cannot proceed, or that there's a budget issue, and so those are other factors. But especially for council to know when we're going to be considering changing something, that's why it's on hold. I think that's really important to document. And then I also think that based on the emails that we received from the public, changing some items on the work plan, adding some items to the work plan, it does beg the question of why other things are not on the work plan, such as the reopening of parks, which will be very important. So I think we should consider, if we're opening up the work plan, I think we should consider making sure that we document all of those important things, and all of those things for recovery. And that will probably be another bigger conversation, but it definitely is important. If we're making changes, then we should document that thoroughly across all of the goal areas, I think.
Thank you. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. Just some general comments. First of all, thanks to the staff for what is evidently a lot of hard work. Secondly, ironically, while you were having the discussion about looking at virtual meetings and other new efforts, my Wi-Fi cut out and I was out of the meeting for a couple of minutes while I was getting it reestablished. So anyway, I didn't get to hear the whole conversation, but I do commend you for looking at how we can expand our virtual outreach, because I think under the best case scenario, we're going to need to use virtual meetings for quite some time. Mm-hmm. The second one is I want to commend Mayor Pauly for the evident diversity that is in the recovery board selections, and I was very pleased to see that it really is a picture of Issaquah's population and interests. So thank you for that. And then finally, I would like to know, and again, I don't need a long report on this, but from the communications group, how well we are doing in terms of outreach to non-English speaking populations and diverse populations in Issaquah during this crisis. And I just like to hear how that is going and if that should be part of our human services perspective. So those are my 3 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure I understand the comments earlier about public safety and any perception that it's in a special category. As I look at these items, none of them are enhancements. None of them are expansions of public safety. They're all just cost containment. They're how to make do with less. So I think those are all entirely in keeping with where we're at and don't reflect any sort of special treatment for public safety. They're just wise and prudent ways to make do with less money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. Thanks, Madam Mayor. So I was just going to ask Councilmember Martz if was your comment or in response to my comments, Councilmember Martz?
Not sure if we lost him.
Uh-oh.
I'm here. I don't really want to get into a squabble over it.
No, it wasn't a squabble. I was going to, if in the case that I wasn't clear, I was just going to clarify. That's all.
Yes, it was. I thought you were saying that this reflected that in some sense public safety was being treated differently than other departments.
No, my comment was that the work plan that we just went over tonight appears to me as that it tracks the strategic plan. That was my, and if I'm misunderstanding, then I would like Administrator Bobkowitz to straighten me out. But if the point of the work plan was to track the strategic plan, then if we add public safety to that, just the report, that doesn't track the strategic plan, and so then that opens it up to, well, what else should we add here? And I wasn't necessarily opposed to it. It just was an outlier in a sense that it's not in the strategic plan. So that was all. I wasn't being critical that it's in there. It's just not a topic that's in the strategic plan. That's all.
But aren't there other things on this list that weren't in the plan that are the result of trying to mitigate the revenue or the cost reductions?
In what we were looking at tonight, my understanding was that this tracks the strategic plan. They're letting us know what the status is of the items they were working on in the strategic plan. So that was my understanding. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah.
Thank you. This is the mayor. I think you both have come across a point of confusion that I think we can better clarify for you. Yes, this is a work plan associated with the strategic plan. It has been impacted by COVID in a couple of different ways. One is the financial impact. Another is a redeployment of resources to address COVID issues that we had not planned for in the original budget and the original resourcing plan. So we've kind of added one thing, but Council President Hunt had made a good point that one of the biggest changes has been what's happened in Parks and Recreation, and we haven't necessarily created that. So I'd like to work with the city administrator in maintaining a strategic plan, work plan, but also having a piece of a work plan called a COVID work plan, where we will tell you what we shut down and how we would reopen it, and where we may have gone to look for extra savings because of the financial hardship. And so we may package it a little different. We'll see when we come back, but I think I understand the sense of the confusion. And we have a couple of comments as well. We have Councilmember Hall, followed by Council President Hunt.
Thanks, Mayor Polly. This is Zach Cole. I guess this isn't super totally relevant, but I feel like earlier this year we were talking a little bit about adding this public safety bucket with regard to our conversation on priority-based budgeting and how that kind of made sense in our minds there. So I just wanted to add that I thought this makes sense here.
Thank you. And I also do think that it's a portion of what we're doing under our services assessment was we were going to look at all services. The order that we look at those services may not have changed due to COVID. So anyway, good point. Council Member or Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt. For me, one of the big pieces of confusion here is that some of these changes do reflect changes in policy that are clearly, in my mind anyway, purview of council, and some are things that the administration is doing that are more operational, that are being done and can be done without the policy guidance of council. And this is the administration's work plan. But when I hear something about how council might consider not going forward with our missing middle strategy because there might be more information, that really sounds to me like a policy decision that we need to have a policy-based conversation on. So that I think is part of the confusion too. I think there are recovery, the administration can set up a recovery task. That is a new thing that was added to the work plan. And it's to address the strategic plan, but then there's also policy-based things that the council might consider, and the role of council in making those decisions is not very transparent in the way this document is being laid out now because it's all together. So that I think that would really help, and I think that would also really help community members understand how they can let us know their opinion on these different topics for the policy-based underlying the policy that underlies some of these decisions. Thanks.
Thank you. And City Administrator Bobkowitz, you would like to make a comment?
Yes, I think there's an important point here that I don't want to be lost, and that is that there are a number of issues that are on hold because we just don't know. Mm-hmm. And what we don't know is what we don't know. And I think on the issues of affordable housing, there could be seismic shifts in the needs in this community. And I think the administration has a responsibility to you, the city council, as the policymakers, to raise a flag. And so that's all that we're trying to do here is to raise a flag. And that there may be a need for an additional policy discussion. And when that time comes, the council will be fully engaged and the council will make the decision. But I think it's our responsibility to say that in our best professional judgment, there are certain circumstances that this community is facing that it has never seen before. And it's happening at a speed unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so the issue of affordable housing, the issue of missing middle, of course, are extraordinarily important. They were extraordinarily important 60 days ago. Will they be of the same importance 60 days from now? I'm not sure. But I think it's my professional obligation to say they may not be, and that the council needs to be prepared perhaps to reopen this if those circumstances change. If they don't, we won't. But there are factors and forces at play here which we have never seen, and I think it's incumbent upon the corporation of the city of Issaquah to be prepared to make those changes and to bring those issues before the council for an appropriate policy discussion.
Thank you. I'm seeing a little bit of activity, and I'm just waiting to see. Yes, Council President Hunt.
Thank you, and thank you to thank you, Wally, for that explanation. I understand that there are unknowns, and so what I think would be very helpful, though, is just to clarify where the administration has made the decisions about what to has made decisions about what council might need to flag for further discussion because the policy, the context around an existing policy may have changed. Because that's different than we don't have resources to do this anymore, or that's different than we can't have community meetings right now, so we can't do this. That's my point. But I take your point that there's a lot of unknowns.
Thank you. I think you've made your point very clear, Council President. Thank you for doing that. I am not seeing anybody else in the conversation box right now. And so if that is the case, we will move on to the next item on the calendar, which is the consent calendar. And the consent calendar was distributed to Council in advance. And if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be approved. Thank you, Tisha. Will be approved by one motion. The Deputy City Clerk is advising me that there is a minor modification to the consent calendar. And Tisha, I wonder if you could explain it to that. I'm not seeing it in my talking points.
Yes, I'm just wanting to speak to a very, very minor clarification. I'd like to read into the record that the motion for Agenda Bill 7968, 2020 Docket of Comprehensive Plan Amendments should read, approve amendments number 1 through 4 on the docket of proposed 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendments as presented in Exhibit A. It was slightly reworded in the published agenda packet, and I wanted to make that correction.
Thank you very much. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
This is Council President Hunt. They have.
This is Councilmember Hall. They have.
Thank you both. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Before we move to the motion, Council President Hunt, did you receive or the council receive any email comments to share on any of the consent calendar items?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt. We did receive some comments from one community member on the items on consent. So I will do my best to summarize those comments now. We received the email from Steve Pereira on the items on consent. He said regarding AB 7937, which is Board Commission Term Extensions Confirmation, he wants and needs the City Council to take these positions and appointments very seriously in how and who they select for such roles. Is my audio okay?
It sounds okay to me, and I'm not seeing any notes on the comment section, so it sounds good.
Okay, I have feedback, so thank you for confirming that. And then he was also concerned on this item about the one-year extension not being extended to the Rivers and Streams Board. Then on AB 7961, the Issaquah Emergency Rental Assistance Program reallocation authorization, he agreed with the reallocation of funds from HopeLink to the other organizations that had been previously in that allocation program. And he requested refocus of funds to restrict funding from up to 80% AMI to 60% AMI. On AB 7961, the Emergency Management Performance Grants, Network Infrastructure, and COVID-19, this is to authorize submittal. He supported this existing grant proposal, but also cautioned against asking or expecting additional financial assistance. AB 7966, which is position reclassifications, he commented he was unsure how the need for these reclassifications came about in the context with other budget changes. And then AB 7968, 2020 Docket of Comprehensive Plan Amendments, several comments on different items, requested that active links be included to reference materials so that you could better track the materials. Also did not feel this was a review of the comprehensive docket as is needed, the comprehensive plan docket as is needed, and had many concerns about specific items, including on the Old Town sub-area plan that so far had not seen commercial building standards that maintains the charm of Old Town and that makes the area so wonderful. So that concludes the comments that were specifically received on consent items this evening.
Thank you. And would any council member care to make a motion? The motion to be made, if somebody would make it, is to move to approve the consent calendar as amended. And I am seeing Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt. I move to approve the consent calendar as amended.
This is Chris Ray. I will second the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Ray. It's been moved and seconded. Can I get the clerk, please, to call the roll?
Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. Moving on to regular business for this evening, AB 7898, the Tyler Technologies Contract Amendment, and I'd like to ask City Administrator Bobkowitz to introduce this item.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we're here this evening seeking the council's authorization for the mayor to enter into and execute a contract amendment with Tyler Technologies for the reimplementation services and software fees for the Munis Enterprise Resources Planning System during fiscal year 2021 and 2022. The adopted budget includes capital funds to allow the city to reimplement the Munis ERP, the financial management system, originally implemented in 2014, as discussed with the council on April 1st and during the budget April 1st, 2019, and during budget deliberations, the city's original implementation of the Tyler Technologies Munis ERP had a number of shortcomings that made it difficult for the city to access financial information in an efficient and timely manner. These shortcomings have resulted in cumbersome and staff-intensive processes and have contributed to recent audit findings. Beginning in 2019, the city contracted with the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada to help us with this. Since then, GFOA city staff have been working on a new scope of work and contract amendment with Tyler Technologies that will serve as the guide for the reimplementation work over the remainder of 2020, 21, and 2022. In your packet this evening is details of this various process. On page 88 of your packet talks about the various phases. Phase 1A would allow us to move forward starting in June 2020 with a go-live target date of January 4, 2021 for accounting, general ledger, budgeting, accounts payable, purchasing, project and grants accounting, contract management, accounts receivable, general billing, as well as several support systems. A second phase, or a phase 1B, which would deal with capital assets, building module for the comprehensive annual financial report, accounts receivable, and general billing would be a target date to start the project in February 21 and go live in June 21. The human resources, like human capital management, would be phase 2, beginning in February 21, ending in January 22. And a community self-service for business license and business and operation tax beginning in July 21 with an implementation in June 22. As the council knows, this has been a long discussion with Tyler Technologies. I was involved myself with a conference call meeting with their senior management to get their assurances that they would be able to move forward with this. There's been a large amount of travel was originally anticipated here. They will be able to do this with a more minimal amount of travel. The adopted budget for the Munis reimplementation was $1,042,500. In addition, the adopted 2020 through 2025 capital improvement plan assumed $347,500 in additional costs. Based on the negotiated scope of work, the overall cost of the reimplementation has come down to what was budgeted. The capital cost is projected at $421,234, less in 2020, $42,000 more in 21, $43,000 more in 2022, resulting in an overall net capital reduction of $335,364 over those 3 fiscal years. So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is an important project. We feel that we now have a scope of work in place with Tyler Technologies that will allow us to move forward, especially with the Phase 1A, which is the core financial system. And we would ask your approval for these contract amendments. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, City Administrator Bobkowitz. Before we go to questions, I would like to check in with Council President Hunt and see if there have been any public comments to the Council this week on this particular topic.
Hi. Tim?
Council President Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt. I did receive one comment on this. We received a comment from Steve Pereira on this item, and his input can be summarized that he did not see a strong case for why this cost should be incurred. That's the conclusion of comments on this item.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councilmember Walsh, I believe you're not on mute right now. Or Councilmember Goodman, not sure if I recognize the voice or not.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Councilmember Ray has a question, followed by Deputy Council President Ray has a question, followed by Council President Hunt.
Just a couple of observations. One is the payment terms, as outlined in the amendment, are for $399,000, and the total value of the entire body of work is $777,000. So I'm just trying to figure out, are we just contracting for part of the work at this point, or why is there this discrepancy in the funds?
Mr. Bobkowitz?
I believe that it has to go with the phasing of this. I may need to literally phone a friend, Deputy Council President Ray. As I think you know, we gave Finance Director Beth Goldberg the night off, hoping that I could answer all the questions at this late hour. But I will reach out to her and see if she can get on the line with us. She is standing by, but I'd be happy to try to answer other questions that you have.
Okay, so the second one I have is somewhat related in that the amendment has no term to it. Generally when I've seen contract amendments, they have an end date to them, and this one doesn't have an end date. And I noticed it because I was trying to rationalize the difference between the payment terms and the total dollars. So I just wondered if there was a reason we didn't put an end date to the amendment.
There is no reason. I think it based on the phasing for this, it takes us through June of 22. So I would think that normally then we would go to the end of the fiscal year. So it would be 12/31/22.
Yeah, and then
we can make that change before it's executed.
Cool, that would be great. And my final comment is really that we're putting this amendment together with no contingency. So I guess if we run into problems, we'll come back and re-amend the contract. Is that the thinking?
I think what I actually have the answer to that question.
Yay!
Beth's plan was to go forward, and since we're shifting some dollars through between fiscal years, there is going to be some additional dollars available in the 20 budget, and that money would be used as a contingency.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, were there other questions?
You're muted.
Of course, I'm muted. Yeah. I was wondering why no one was talking to me. Council President Hunt, followed by Councilmember Martz. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. Thank you for the information, City Administrator Bobkowitz. This is a large amount of money, especially when we're so conscious of our budget right now. And you talked about the improvement in financial reporting and the importance of that, but I wondered if you could tell us what additional, what the value is, how often we'll be able to access up-to-date financial information, just to a summary of the value of this spend.
Council President, Yes, thank you. I was trying to reach my friend who's not picking up. With any online financial system, the idea is that at any moment in time you can get a financial position. We currently do not have that. What we have committed to now through the COVID crisis is to dedicate staff to prepare that information on a monthly basis, which we were not even able to do previously. So I would suspect that you would see a comprehensive financial report monthly from us. And then as we would need to provide additional information to the council on any particular subject or funding source, that would be readily available, where now it is not.
Council President Hunt, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's an opportunity to do a little math, and I wanted to respond to Councilmember Ray. Just looking at the quote, there's 3 buckets. The first bucket is 71.6. That's the SAAS. Tyler's 126. Other services is 579.6. Those second 2, bucket 2 and bucket 3, add up to the 705,590, and then the 71.6 that I mentioned before, they total the grand total of 777.2.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. I had a question for Deputy Council President Ray, and that was whether or not you have enough information. Or would you like City Administrator Bobkowitz to continue to try and call his friend?
So I just wanted to respond a little bit to Councilmember Martz. I got the total dollars. What I'm concerned about is I don't know, quite honestly, how much this amendment is for. I don't know if it's for $399,000, if it's for $777,000, if it's for some other amount, because it doesn't clearly identify that, and I don't know if it's for the 77 plus the 85 for travel. It's not clear what the dollar amount we're amending this contract for is. So I really do. I have some structural problems right now, quite honestly. I don't know how long the contract runs for, and I don't know what we are approving in terms of dollars. It's not clear to me. So clarity would make me happier.
City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Ray, the finance director who we wanted to give the night off to, who promised me she would keep her phone handy should there be a question, is not picking up. Okay. So we could leave this for the meeting on Thursday, if you'd like, and have that. I don't know if a few days will make a difference. I think that I apologize for not being able to put my finger on what is a very reasonable question that Councilmember Ray is requesting. So, Madam Mayor, perhaps we could hold this item, have a short public session maybe at the beginning of the Thursday meeting, Thursday afternoon. I'll be able to answer the question. As everyone has said, this is too important, and I don't want there to be any question on any council member's mind. It is 10:10 in the evening, and again, I wanted very much the finance director, so I apologize that I didn't do enough due diligence with her to anticipate all the questions.
I think Thursday is good, as long as it still fits within the time frame. It sounds like it does. We also have a question from Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. I was just trying to read the recommended motion, which says authorize the mayor to enter into and execute a contract amendment, which doesn't necessarily say we're approving that contract amendment or any specific dollars. So I was just trying to see if there was a way around that. But I think knowing that we're potentially looking at Thursday sounds like a better plan than messing with a potential motion to get around it. So,
Yeah, there's a couple. This is the mayor. There's a couple things in there. So I'm still would be looking for some sort of motion that moves this forward to a date certain, which would be Thursday, and we can always adjust the approval motion to include the amount, if that would help provide clarity.
Madam Mayor, the amendment is for $399,725. So that is not a question. I think there are other questions that have been asked by Councilmember Ray, which I think need to have more specific answers. I think we need to include an end term or an end date, and that is easily done. But the amendment is for $399,725. That is what the document states. So as far as how it impacts other spending with Tyler, again, we're happy to come back on Thursday with that information.
Great. So I need to check with the clerk since we're looking at an alternative motion. The language for that motion would be to direct the administration to bring this agenda bill back to a special meeting on Thursday, May 7th. Would that be the correct motion?
Yes, a motion to postpone the item to the special meeting on the 7th would work well.
Move to postpone.
And include the date. I'm sorry, the time.
Yep, AB 7898 to the special council meeting of May 7th at, and we said, I believe that one's starting at 6 p.m.
Correct.
And I'm going to look to Council President Hunt for a question. Oh,
this
sorry.
Council President Hunt, I'm prepared to make a motion when questions have been answered.
Yes, I believe we're through the questions that have been noted in the message board, so go ahead.
Okay. I would move to postpone this agenda item to bring it back to City Council at our special meeting on May 7th at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
This is Chris Ray. I'll second that.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. It's been moved and second to move to postpone AB 7898 to move it to the special council meeting on May 7th at 6 p.m. All those in favor, say aye. Sorry, actually, I will ask the city clerk to do a roll call vote. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Can you do a roll call vote?
Yes, Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving to the good of the order. Do any council members have anything they would like to share for good of the order? While I'm waiting to see if anybody else wants to chime in, I will share that there are some upcoming council meetings. There's all council study sessions and all board and commission meetings, except for the Civil Service Commission, if they are needed, are canceled through May. The Recovery Task Force will begin meeting virtually this month. City Council regular meetings will continue to occur as scheduled using a remote meeting platform. And on the May 18th, regular City Council meeting at 7 p.m., potential agenda items are the 2020 budget amendment, 2020 budget reauthorizations, and an amendment to personnel policies. And as of this evening, there will be some action on Thursday night special council meeting for proposal to approve AB 7898, the Tyler Technologies contract amendment. Does anyone else have anything for good of the order? Seeing none, the executive session was held during the special meeting earlier this evening, so there's no additional executive session. And that being said, we are no further business, and the meeting is adjourned at 10:17 p.m. Thank you all.